This is going to be kind of a practical workshop on how to use the refactored share that's in the 4.2 release. So let me talk a little bit about what I'm going to go through here. I was going to talk a lot about how to set up a development environment for share, but it turns out you really don't need to do very much to. And I'll talk about what the requirements are for that. And then I'll actually define that simple page, spend a little bit of time talking about Dojo, which the new refactoring is based on, and then set up a simple widget and then finish. Now, how many people saw Dave Draper's talk yesterday about share? Okay, a few of you, that's good. Dave went over a lot of the background about how the code was refactored and why he did it, and so I'm not going to go very much into that. But my perspective is this, really. I'm kind of looking in from the outside. I'm a lot like you guys. I actually work with the partners, and I'm not a member of the core engineering team. I actually use the code that's developed by the engineering team, and I get to explain how it works to the partners. So I have a lot of the same perspective as you, so hopefully you'll be able to relate to that a bit. This will be the last dog slide, and there will be no cat slides if you saw the presentation this morning. So there is, however, a audience participation part of the demo here. So if you see this sign, you can applaud politely. But if you see this sign, there should be like giant 50-foot putt golf chairing. All right. So to get started, here's the development environment that I have on my image. So I set it up with Eclipse, and of course, if you set up Eclipse, you need to install Java. You can also set up Maven, because now everything is distributed as a Maven artifact. And you can also set up M2, which is the Maven plugin for Eclipse, and use that to build stuff. Now, you don't necessarily really need to do that for share development. The reason that you might want to do that is just for editing facilities, and also to use Maven to build jar files and things that you might want to install. But you probably will not be doing any type of Java development or anything that really requires any type of compiling. You don't specifically need this stuff. You can use a text editor and kind of build stuff yourself if you want to. However, I would recommend getting the Alfresco source code, which has a Maven POM in it that shows how to build a jar. I'm going to distribute a code package, by the way. It'll be put up on the website within the next week or so that has some examples of this, plus all the example code that I'm going to be showing you. But if you get the Alfresco source, Dave's got implementations of a lot of widgets, like 30 or 40 widgets are set up there. And they're excellent guides. They're pretty well documented in terms of the code, and you can kind of see what's happening for a lot of different types of things. If you don't want to download the source, you can just also look at the widgets right in the Tomcat directory, and of course you can see them right there too. So enough on the development environment. So Dave talked a little bit yesterday about why he refactored share and how he was able to use the stuff that he's built for Surf and kind of maintain what he's built. But really, there's really a lot of benefits to the refactoring that he's done. And the thing that I really want you to take away today is that what he's done is really fairly amazing to me, because he has a very small team of people. And it's really, really, really a lot easier to build custom share pages with the new code. I mean, just astoundingly easier. So, little bit of bookkeeping things about where the source code is. So, if you get the source code out of Subversion, there's a project under the root projects called Slingshot. That's actually the share project. Underneath the Slingshot project, there's a couple of directories, source, and then you go to web. And all of the widget library that he's built is under JavaScript Alfresco. So that's where you can kind of find all of the code. There's also a bunch of new theming there that you can take a look at as examples, and that's also pretty useful to see. However, there is this caveat, and he went over this in the presentation that he had yesterday. It's not production code except for the code that's used in the current share headers. So it may change, and you want to just use that as a bit of a warning. But it's definitely really interesting to look at, and so just be careful if you're going to use it in anything that is important to you. Now, the way the widget code is organized is like this, which is actually a Dojo pattern. So underneath the JavaScript Alfresco directory, there's a bunch of widget directories. The widget directories have these types of subdirectories. There's one for CSS, one for the internationalization strings, and one for templates. Now, templates are actually little HTML fragments that you can include as part of the Dojo widget pattern, and I'll talk some more about that later. But that actually is a really powerful feature that you can use and leverage. That's a pretty interesting thing, and it's part of the rationale for why Dave refactored it, I believe. In addition, if you have images that you want to use, you can drop those into the CSS directory. So it looks sort of like this. Occasionally, you'll see some other subdirectories under the widget directory as well, and you can kind of figure out what those are for. Now, if you're going to make a production page or widget using the new framework, to deploy it, you should use an AMP file. That is the official position of Alfresco, and that's what the support folks will tell you, or consultants, if they come in, will ask you if you've got an AMP, and if you don't, they're going to not be pleased with you. AMPs, of course, go under the Alfresco directory in one of the AMP files like this, or one of the AMP directories. You can build those with the Maven POM. And so the advantage of AMP files really is that you can kind of carry them across release upgrades, and so that's why it's a good thing to do. However, if you're developing, I would suggest using the shared classes directory under Tomcat. That's a good place to drop stuff where it won't interfere with kind of the base of Alfresco. And so you can use the library directory there. Sometimes the library directory is turned off. You're not really supposed to use shared per se, in it, especially in a production environment, so this is a development thing. The reason that is because it's shared across every application that is used by the Tomcat server. So it's a bit of a security hole. So this is really not a good thing to do for a production environment. But you can jar up a file that has your page or your widget in it, and then you can put all of the resources that it needs inside of the jar file and put it in the lib, and then it's like a little functioning unit in there. So that's one way to do development. A different way to do development is to just drop single files into the shared classes Alfresco web extensions directory. Anything that's put in underneath the site Webscripts directory there, Share will find as a page, and I'll talk a little bit more about how it does that, but so you can put it under any path pretty much under shared Webscripts, or site Webscripts rather. And so you can put individual files in there. You can just edit them in place if you want to. And so that's a good way to develop new pages. New in this release is this thing, which is really pretty cool. You can serve resources now directly out of the repository. What they've done is they've, under the data directory, in the repository, at the top of the repository, there's a special file that's called share resources. You can see it there sort of on the lower part of the screen. And this is not there by default. You have to put that in. The administrator actually has to make that up for you and give you access to write into it. And then there's, underneath that, there's a directory called pages. If you put files into this directory that are page definition files, you can instance them directly using an URL that I'll show you in a couple of minutes. And it's also served by this application, which is a new thing that I believe is released with the 4.2 code, but it's also not really publicized yet. But this is a really kind of interesting and cool little tool called the Page Creator. So this is a JSON editor that you can use to build up a hierarchy of widgets, and then you can use it to display the widget, and so it'll preview the widget there. You hit the button in the bottom, and it'll show you what it looks like. And then if you enter a string up in the top box there, it'll save it into that directory that I just showed you in the data dictionary. Also, you will want to get familiar with this page, which is the Share Webscript index page. One thing that's really important is that while you're doing development iterations, you need to be able to get rid of the cached resources, and I'll talk a lot more about this in a minute. But essentially what happens now with the new implementation is that the surf code will read in the JSON that you define for a page. It will interpret it, and then it will start caching resources, and it caches like all of the stuff. It caches JavaScript, it caches CSS, it caches HTML, and it puts them all into a cache buffer for you. So if you're making changes to any of that stuff, it won't show up unless you hit this button. So very important to just keep this one probably open as you're doing some development. Go there, you hit this button, clear the cache, then you can refresh your page and you'll see whatever change that you've made to the script. Also is this page, or this configuration here, which I think also used to be in the product, but does some interesting new stuff now. So there's a couple of different places that you can configure this tag, which is called client debug. If you turn this tag on to true in either one of these files, the share custom config overwrites the configuration in the primary base one at the top. So if you have both of them, you need to set it in the second one. It'll turn on this other menu that says debug menu in your share application. So you can use that menu to turn on different debug types of listings, and that'll greatly help you as you're trying to debug your applications. Now, one of the things that we talk about with the new share is something called zero build, and this has to do with how the caching works. So the idea is that instead of going back to make a bunch of calls back to the server to get different things, here's what happens, is you set up a page, and the page is defined with some JSON, and surf gets invoked basically through some servlets that are based on the URL that you give it. So surf analyzes the JSON and determines what widgets need to be loaded and what other resources the widgets have dependencies on. And then it will go back to the server and do this. So it flattens out the JavaScript. It loads all of the pages that are, or rather the widgets that are referenced, and creates resources that are JavaScript. And then it also buffers up any other resources, CSS or anything like that, that are dependent upon the widgets that you've loaded. And then once it's got that all buffered, then it will actually generate an output page for you. So if you actually would like to see how that works, you can actually watch it happen in real time using a JavaScript debugger. So if you open up a JavaScript console and watch a page load, what you'll see is all these resources start to fill in down the far side of the page there. So it'll have a bunch of resources. Some of them will be Dojo resources. Some of them will be your resources that it's actually compiled into a JavaScript format. There'll be CSS resources and all the other dependencies in there. So that's kind of a cool thing to see. And sometimes you need to actually get in there anyway to find errors that you've made. So this is actually how surf gets invoked, is there are specific URLs that invoke share or surf servlets, rather. And that's what runs the analysis on the JSON that you've passed as the page. So these top two are actually standalone URLs. The DP part of it actually builds a page for you without any share header or footer. But the really cool part is there's actually a hybrid page now, so you don't have to worry about including the share header and footer. So all the navigation for share gets included automatically for you, along with the share footer, if you want to, by using this URL. And then if you want to load the page from the repository itself, there's another one called a hybrid remote page, and you can use one of these URLs here to do that. So those are three different ways that you can actually invoke the page building in the new software. So here's the project that I decided I would try to build for this talk. So a lot of times what I hear from partners is, you know, I don't really want to have people going in to share, you know, I don't want, it seems kind of complicated. Don't really want to have people have to navigate through to find stuff. I just like them to have a simple user interface that I can use, or they can use, to do their job, right? So using the new software, it's actually very easy to do that now. You can build a page that is just a very special purpose thing that is very specific to a single function, somebody's job function. And you can set it up so that it makes calls back to the repo using Webscripts. And it lets them do their function without having to expose share at all. So the little concept that we have here is that this person would be like some kind of photo editor for some other larger project. The project might be in a share site, but the site might contain several directories that have sets of photographs in them that get loaded up from some photographer in a, you know, like into a raw directory. And so we would like to be able to set those into kind of a slide tray analogy where a person can sort them, say these are ones I want to keep for this project, these are ones that I'm going to reject and I might want to use these. So that's the analysis or the type of thing that we're going to set up. So there might also be several projects, and that would represent multiple sites too. So the UI concept that I came up with looks something like this. You'd usually want to put like some kind of company header banner on it. You'd have an area down one side that would have the list of slide trays for that particular site. You might have an area where you could change what the slide trays represent. So there might be a couple of menus there that would let you select different sites or filter what is shown in there somehow. And then there'd be a photo viewing area. So once you select a tray, it would loop through the list of slides that it's actually found. So all this is stuff that you can build with back-end web scripts. So you can run queries against the database to find a site and find directories and then find photographs in them. And then just return those as a JSON representation back to the front end, and then the widgets can display them. So to build a page, and first off, there's this, once again, caveat. This is kind of my amateur building of the page, plus it's not production quality software exactly. Here's what I wanted to build. So I've got the header bar at the top, footer bar at the bottom, and in this case I didn't put a company special one on there, but I could have. I've got a filter area up there that has a couple of menus, And then I've got a couple of spaces for widgets that I'll need to build that are not part of the current widget library. So I was going to put an accordion in. And if you're probably familiar with user interface design, accordions are kind of open and close type of menu type of things. And then maybe a light box to show the photographs as well. So that's just kind of outlining what is there. Now, in order to set up a page that's a standalone page, you'll still need to have 4 files here. And this looks sort of like the old implementation of Share. There's a descriptor file, which is where it gets the name of the page from. So Share looks through the directories looking for this pattern, description.xml. And we'll read those in, and then it has a list of pages. The JavaScript file, which is the Webscript controller file, we use the MVC pattern, right? That has the JSON in it. There's still a free marker template, but the template is much different than it used to be. And then you can put some properties there if you have some strings that you want to include on the page. So that's pretty straightforward. And you need to put those all in the same directory, and like I say, you can put them anywhere under the site Webscripts directory. So the descriptor file looks pretty much like it used to. You can have a description in there, you can have a short name for it, but the thing that is important is the URL tag there. Now, here's what's really different, is all the FTL files can look just like this, where it just has a single directive that tells Surf to process the JSON for the page that you have built. You can put some other stuff in this file, but you don't really need to. You can just keep it like this. So that's really all that you need to have there. And that's kind of cool and easy. So here's what some of the JSON looks like to actually set up a page. So what you do is you set up an array of widgets that are pulled into the page. So these are all loaded as Surf analyzes the page. They're included by name, like you can see here. So I've got one that has the title on it. I've got another one that has a sidebar container. So since I wanted to split the page into a couple of different panes, I included the sidebar container, so that gives me a left side and then the main pane. And you can even set the width of the pane pretty easily if you include additional tagging here for under the configuration tags. That just basically goes in and sets variables in the JavaScript directly in the widget. So I've added in some additional JSON here. This is sort of based on the example that Dave had in some of his blogs earlier in the year. So this actually sets up a menu bar at the top. So remember, I was going to have the filter part of it. It sets up a menu bar, and it adds a couple of menu base tags to it, so then I can build a menu underneath each one of those if I want to. And then the one thing to notice there is that there's this alignment tag there that actually puts it in the sidebar. So it's very, very, very straightforward and easy to understand the syntax of this and to figure out where things should go. So that's one of the really cool parts of this. So I thought I would stop here and actually reflect on how cool this is. So here's my personal story. Last year, I built this user interface using the old Share libraries and some JQuery. I did this for an internal project where I was wanting to track some data about some of our partners. So when I built this interface, I thought, well, I'm going to figure this out myself, and I'm going to try to just see how hard this is for partners to actually learn this. So I got the red Alfresco book, which has a fairly long section about how to program and share in it. A lot of you may have actually read that book. And it's got an example in it of how to set things up, but it's a pretty straightforward, simple page. It doesn't really have any different panes or anything like what I wanted to do. And So I ended up with some page definition code that looks like this. And remember, you used to have to map sections of the page to different pieces of JavaScript, and there's some YUI tags in there that I wasn't really sure what they were doing, and then there's a lot of different files that you have to actually set up, and you have to know where they go. And this is actually a diagram that I made up for a talk that I gave on share development last year that has about 16 steps in it about different files you need to make and put them someplace. And then you have to figure out where in the share hierarchy all that stuff needs to go. And then by the end of it, your head pretty much blows up. So in the new scheme of things, I built this page, the page background that I defined, using the page creator tool, just the little JSON tool, and looking up some of the attributes of the widgets that I'd want to define. So I thought, I'll see if there's a sidebar container, and sure enough, there is one right there. And I looked in there, and I figured out how to actually add things in so they showed up in the sidebar. And I did that in 30 minutes without really having any help or training or anything else like that to get me through it. So it's really, really, really easy, and it's much, much better now. So here's the tremendous applause, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Draper. So now let's talk a little bit about Dojo. So what's Dojo? Well, it's a JavaScript library. Here's the polite applause. But actually, it does a lot of really good stuff for you. So we know there's a whole bunch of different JavaScript libraries around. This one's been around for a few years. There's some newer ones. But this one actually does some really interesting things that are very beneficial. One of the first things that it does is this, the asynchronous module definition. So what that means is that you can load things asynchronously, and like I showed that JavaScript console page where it actually loads the resources. All those things are loaded asynchronously. They're built asynchronously. And so you get rid of all of the dependencies that you used to have kind of floating around in Share. So you can build widgets that are actually little standalone blocks of code. They've got their own resources, own CSS, everything. And it's very cool that way. In addition, it has this feature that allows you to do widget templating, which is the ability to build a widget, actually include some HTML along with the widget, which can be very cool for you too. It's got accessibility constructs, which, as you heard this morning, is very important for us in terms of a lot of our customers really require being able to do accessibility, which is making text and fonts and everything bigger. And that's actually really a hard problem if you think about it in terms of how user interfaces work. So that's a really neat thing to have built in. And then it also has a user or a unit testing facility built into it as well, which is another bonus for you guys. So this is what Dojo looks like from a library standpoint. There's a part of it that's called base. There's another part that sits on top of the base called core. There's this part, which is actually the unit testing part, and it's sometimes referred to as the Dojo module. Dijit, which is a widget library that comes with Dojo. And then there's an experimental widget library, which is stuff that you can use at your own risk type of thing. And then Dave has wrapped all of that stuff with an Alfresco class called Alfresco Core, so it pulls all of that stuff in automatically for you. So you have all of that functionality available to you when you write a widget. So in the standard way of using Dojo, you would have some JavaScript at the top of the page. You'd pull the Java or the Dojo library in, just using a source tag like this. Whoops, that's the wrong way. But Surf actually pulls all of that stuff in for you, as well as providing a context for it. as it actually does the analysis and the build of the page. So we're actually using 1.9 of Dojo now, which is the latest Dojo release. And if you look here, you see this base URL tag that's in there. That's where the base of the resources that it will look for when it goes back to the server are located. So everything is relative to that location on your server. And as you can see, it pulls in things and it names them by package, so that's sort of like a Java kind of thing. So you can reference constructs in here later by name, and if you want to go and change any of this stuff, it's in a configuration file that you can get at and modify. So Dojo has a module definition capability. This is sort of the old Dojo way of doing things. You can say, provide this, and that defines a module, code module. And so that's the name of the code module. And then when you need it, you can reference that module by saying, I require this module. So that's sort of like a Java include type of statement. But that does a synchronous load of that code. So it actually goes out and pulls the code in real time. So to get around that, they later in the development of Dojo, I think about 1.7 or 1.8 of Dojo, they came up with this AMD definition. And it's got a different keyword and pattern. And so this is the pattern that you use when you define a widget. It looks a bit arcane. It's kind of a bit hard to get through. But basically what it's saying is there's an array of things that I'm going to include. And I'll talk more about what that means in a second. And then you pass it to a callback function and return the instance of the object. So that uses a little bit different syntax than was on the previous slide. It actually uses slashes to separate now instead of dots, and that's something to take note of. If you're going to require things, so including it, this is the syntax that you use for that. But you don't really need to worry about that because Surf takes care of that automatically for you as it does the page analysis. However, this also does cross-domain loading, so you need to be careful about that a little bit because that can be kind of a security problem depending on what you're doing. So the array that was at the top of the previous slide there is what's called an array of mixins. So Dojo provides a mechanism to actually kind of do multiple parent inheritance, I guess is the way to think about it. And so you can add different pieces of, or different modules in, if there is and that just gets appended to whatever thing you're building. So if it's got some functionality in there, like my Accordion widget, I can just pull that in, and whatever accordion stuff it's got, it just appends it into the base. So there's a base widget, there's what's called a template widget, which actually allows me to use the HTML, and then it pulls in whatever else it needs. And if there's any functions that are named the same, the last one that's included wins. So that's how that works. And you should always mix in this module here called the core module, like I said. And that has a bunch of other utility functions and wrappers of code that are useful for you. Dojo has an event model that you can use a couple of different ways. There's a pub sub model, which means that I can, in my widget declaration, I can say I want to publish an event, and then I can listen for it in a different widget. So in the page that I'm building there, for example, I might publish an event saying that one of the buttons inside of one of my panes has been clicked, and the Lightbox widget could subscribe to listen for that event. So when that fires, then that guy gets the widget and can do something with that. Or you can also use what's called event bubbling, which means that the event actually moves up the hierarchy of widgets that are defined until it finds a handler for it, and then it stops at that point. So Dijit provides a widget library, which you might expect. So it's got like I said, it's got these infrastructure widgets, which are a base that you can use, and this is the ones that you always include when you define one of your own widgets. And then it's got a bunch of other actual widgets that are fairly robust and complicated. So it's got the types of things that you might expect from a widget library. It's got the form widgets, and then it's got all the other stuff as well. So to build my own widget, as you recall, here's where we left off. I was going to try to build an accordion and a lightbox. So the cool thing about widgets is, like I said, it actually encapsulates all of the stuff that you need to include in one little place. And so this is really a good thing, because now you only have to worry about very small pieces of code. You don't have to worry about setting up the internationalization strings for the whole user interface. You can just do it for the part of the UI that you're defining. And then you can manipulate that all as a single unit. And all of that gets cached for you, by the way, so any other references to that actually point to that cached representation. So here's the accordion widget. There's actually one in the Dijit library, so I use that as my parent. And it takes another Dijit widget called a content pane as its child. So here's how I wanted this to work. So I've got my page. I'm going to make a reference to my accordion widget. And then the accordion widget is going to make a call to a web script in the repository to get a list of the locations where there are slide trays, essentially, right? So that's going to run a query on the repo, return some JSON to me that shows me where those things are, or at least what the names are, with some pointers to how I can get back to them. And then for each one of those that I get, I'm going to build a different accordion pane or a content pane that goes into my accordion container. So you can see I'm going to make a new class based on the existing accordion class. And I'm going to do that so I can add in some of this stuff, like the part that makes the call to the repo. And then once all that gets resolved, then I should get a accordion widget that looks something like that out of it. So here's some code. And we can I'm going to go through this at a pretty high level. Like I say, if you want to really look at the code, I'll have a package for you that you can go through it and really see what it does. So the class for the code is just the file name of the JavaScript that you give it. So the first part of this is that define pattern I showed you a couple of minutes ago. So the first part of this is an array of things that I want to mix in. So I've got the widget base, I've got the templated mix-in, which is how you always define these at the beginning. I've pulled in Alfresco Share. The next one pulls in a HTML template, which I can use, and I can make that as complicated as I want to and fill in pieces of it, or just use like another directive where I can actually stuff the DOM model from inside the widget if I want to. I've got the accordion container from Dijit, the content pane from Dijit, and then array is just another class that's sort of a utility class that I use. So the important thing here when you define one of these is to make sure that the function declaration just has the same amount of parameters as things that you've defined in the array, and that's just the pattern that they use. So the next thing inside of the widget that I would do would be to pull in my CSS, my internationalization strings, and then the template for the widget itself that I just defined up in the resource array up there. So that's all pretty straightforward code. So then Dojo has a mechanism to make an AJAX call back to a server. It's called XHR. Dave has also wrapped that call with some utility functions of our own so that we can make calls back to repos and be able to add our own code in for whatever we want to do. So it's always good to use our wrapped calls instead of the actual base Dojo calls. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting up a resource back to a web script. That's what this part of it does here. Then I make a get call. You can define a couple of callbacks that get called based on whether it's the call is successful or not successful. And once again, this is all asynchronous. So the results will be returned, and the callback will be called as soon as the server returns. So inside of that callback, what I would do then is unspool the JSON that I got back, build a bunch of content panes, an array of content panes, and then I would have those available inside of my widget so that I can load them up for the accordion. So the last thing that happens when you execute the widget function, or a callback call rather, is there's a method called postcreate. Postcreate gets fired pretty much all the way at the end after everything has been created, so that's where you can actually interactively define things into your DOM model. And so I'm building an accordion here, so that's actually making an instance of the widget that I define. And then I loop through the array of content panes that I built up for my XHR call, add them to the HTML that I've pulled in for the template, and then the container node is actually a special directive that has to do with the way the template is set up. So it's some of this you need to go through and read some of the Dojo documentation about how some of this works. But it's all pretty straightforward to get through, and so I was able to build up the accordion and get it to work. So to finish my page, I just added in this directive, so it's got the name of the accordion container. I told it I want it to be in the sidebar, and that's what the page looks like now. So that took, way less than it took me to develop the other page code, so that was maybe about 3 or 4 days of work there. So, well, what did we learn? There's a new asynchronous module infrastructure that provides a lot of different benefits for you. It allows you to build widgets that are single atomic things with all of the resources that you need to build them. And it's got a lot of really good features as part of the base library. So in terms of the page construction, it's really straightforward. The syntax is really easy to understand. And pretty much the hardest part of it is just to make sure that you get your JSON brackets straight. And to construct a widget, that's also pretty easy to get through. There's a bunch of pretty simple to understand patterns to do that. And so you can, as a community, do a couple interesting things there. You can contribute those back if you want to, or you could actually sell those as commercial entities now if you're a partner. So that actually gives you another way to do some interesting development now. So once again, big thanks to the UI team who have made things way much easier. And does anybody have any questions? Got a microphone for you up here.
So, this is a great way of creating pages. How about forms and such things? Is there a plan for making these widgets and stuff so you can use them when declaring forms, let's say for workflows and editing the forms and so on?
Absolutely. So Dojo has a pretty extensive set of all the form things that you can imagine. There's text boxes and check boxes and all that type of stuff. Dave has wrapped almost all of those already, so those are available in the Alfresco widget library. So if you go looking through there, there's actually a forms widget package, I believe. Is that right, Dave? You got a form thing there? And inside, if you look inside of form, all of those widgets are defined in there. So you can use those, pull them in, and then you can grab events and submit them through the XHR call. Any other questions?
Maybe I should have asked the question yesterday, but I guess that Share is currently rewrite to use all this widget library. And so my question, what about backward compatibility?
That's actually a very good question. This is another good reason to applaud Dave. He's actually set the code up so it is backward compatible. And you can probably address that better than I can, actually.
So Share's really big, and the UI team isn't very big. And there was just no way we could rewrite the whole of Share using this. But we wanted to start, writing things in a sort of smarter way, if you like. So we're very conscious of not breaking stuff that already exists, because we wouldn't be very popular if we did that. So everything that you knew before still holds true. It's still Surf, it's still Share. We haven't taken any of that stuff away. Even when we probably start to rewrite one of the first things I think we're going to look at is the document library. All of the old code will still be there. You'll still be if you've got big customizations for the document library, you'll still be able to reference all of those. You'll still be able to view that page. It just means it's an area that particular sort of legacy style, we won't be continuing to develop. But we don't want to break anything you have. I mean, we really don't. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make it, we're trying to recognize the problems that exist, and we want to make it easier for you to develop new stuff and easier for ourselves to develop new stuff. But if you're comfortable with the way, Share is now, and you're comfortable with Webscripts and FreeMarker and all that kind of stuff, and UE2 or whatever you want to do, just keep doing it the way you are, because it's still all going to be based on the same infrastructure. But if you're coming to this with a new project, then try this new stuff out. And as I sort of said yesterday, we're trying to get this information out to you early, because I think everyone would have been a bit more annoyed if, like, it was at Summit next year, I'd have turned up and said, ta-da, here's a whole load of new stuff. Everything you knew up until now is changed. So this is early days for this approach. We are using it already. You'll see in the header we're using it. And I kind of said yesterday, we want your feedback as early as possible. We want we want to try this stuff out and give us feedback, and we'll try and improve it and iterate on it. So yeah. And I'd also, while I haven't got the microphone, I'd like to thank Kevin, because he's been a real guinea pig on this. I mean, he's all the stuff he's done. He's asked me a few questions, but mostly he's just gone and dug into it himself. And so I really appreciate Kevin taking the time to do this, because it's it's not easy. We don't do enough. I haven't provided enough docs yet, and we know it's something to be working on. It is something we will continue to work on. So I'd like to thank. So I think Kevin should get a big round. He should get one anyway. But give him a big round of applause. So.
Well, like I say, it's a fairly remarkable piece of work, because Dave was able to refactor the code, keep the existing constructs in place so that it is backward compatible, plus put a whole new layer on top of it that gives you some really, really good stuff. So I think you'll really like it if you give it a try. All right, any other questions?
I noticed that you were using the Dojo XHR call directly, which is a very low-level thing within Dojo. Do you support something higher level, like for example, the JSON REST interface, which then provides object stores, which interfaces much easier with some of the other Dojo widgets?
You don't actually have to do that. You have basically your choice of transport back to the repository. One thing I didn't talk about that I will have in some extended notes for this talk is that you can also wrap any other JavaScript library or anything else that you really want to use. It's very simple to do that, and also plug it into the framework. So if you wanted to use jQuery, some of the AJAX transports that they've got there, you can easily do that as well. So yeah, if you want to use some higher level stuff, it's pretty easy to include it. Yeah, one up in the front ring.
Well, maybe a bit lame question. The page which you developed, it still looked a bit like Share, because it had this menu on the top,
exactly,
with the Share actions. Is there a way to use widgets so that users even not aware that they use Share at all, so that there is no custom or Share actions or anything?
I'll have to apologize. It's a bit of laziness on my part. Remember I showed you the page creator that I was using to prototype it. So that goes into the repository, and when I was actually doing the slides for this presentation, I was using the URL that pulls the representation out of the repository. So I don't know if you could actually see any of that, but it uses that HRP call, the remote page load. If I just used DP on the exact same code, and actually in order to do that, I would need to have a couple of the other files there, the descriptor file and that stuff. But if I had the descriptor file set up in my shared directory there, I would easily be able to do that, and you wouldn't see any of the share constructs around it at all. So yeah, it's like I say, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can have the headers on it and not have the headers on it. And so it's really easy to change. It just change the URL. So, okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.